Echoes of Chaos Chapter 2 The Silent Ward. The smell of sterile antiseptic and rubbing alcohol hit Sonic the moment the heavy wooden door clicked open. It was a cold, sharp scent that instantly locked his lungs, making it impossible to draw a full breath. The room was bathed in a dim, clinical shadow, shielded from the chaotic London morning by thick, drawn privacy curtains. The only illumination came from a bank of towering GUN medical monitors, their screens casting a pale green glow over the central bed. Sonic's breath hitched in his throat. There, swathed in white hospital linens, lay Tom, the local sheriff, the man who was usually a fortress of unshakable safety and bad dad jokes, looked terribly small beneath the harsh fluorescent glare. A thick, pristine white bandage was wrapped tightly around his torso beneath his open hospital gown, starkly contrasting against the dark bruising swelling across his jaw. A clear plastic oxygen mask was fitted over his nose and mouth, fogging up with every agonizingly slow, shallow breath he took. Beside the bed, slumped in a rigid metal chair with her head buried in her folded arms, was Maddie. Her clothes were still covered in the dust and soot of the ruined UN headquarters, her hair a tangled mess. At the sound of the door clicking, she bolted upright, her eyes wide, bloodshot, and frantic.
Sonic?
Maddie's voice was a ragged, broken gasp. For a second, the heavy, suffocating silence of the room held them all hostage. Then Maddie threw herself out of the chair. She dropped to her knees right in front of Sonic, wrapping her arms around his shaking, dirt-caked frame and pulling him tightly against her shoulder. Sonic buried his face in her shirt, his small fingers clutching her jacket with a desperate, white-knuckled grip. Tails and Knuckles stepped softly into the room behind them, letting the door close with a quiet, heavy thud. Tails immediately clamped his hands over his mouth, a fresh wave of tears welling in his eyes at the sight of Tom's motionless body. Knuckles stood like a silent sentinel at the foot of the bed. His head bowed, his heavy fists unclenching as he stared at the rhythm of the heart monitor.
Mom!
Sonic choked out, his voice muffled against her chest. He was trembling so hard he could barely keep his balance.
Is he going to?
Maddie pulled back just enough to look into his swollen green eyes, her hands gently cupping his face. Her palms were warm, but her fingers were trembling just as badly as his.
The doctors. They just finished surgery an hour ago, Sonic. The internal bleeding was severe. Shadow's hit. It fractured 2 of his ribs and caused a minor tear in his lung.
Sonic felt a cold, sharp spike of guilt pierce his heart at the mention of Shadow's name.
They stabilized him,
Maddie continued, her voice cracking as she glanced back at her husband.
but he hasn't woken up yet. They have him on heavy sedatives and pain management. Right now, we just have to wait. We have to wait and see if he can breathe on his own when the anesthesia wears off.
Sonic wrenched himself from Maddie's grip and stumbled toward the side of the bed. He climbed onto the small plastic footstool, his knees knocking together, and reached over the metal safety railing. His small blue-furred hand looked microscopic as he wrapped his fingers around Tom's limp, pale thumb. It was cool to the touch.
Hey, Donut Lord!
Sonic whispered, his voice cracking so completely it was barely a sound. A hot tear slipped off his nose, splashing onto the sterile white sheet.
Come on, wake up, please! You told me I had some growing up to do before I could be a hero. Well, I tried to do the right thing. I went to space, and we stopped the laser, and...
He squeezed Tom's thumb, his shoulders shaking violently as a heavy sob racked his chest.
And I can't do this if you're not here. I can't go back to Green Hills without you. Please, Dad, open your eyes.
But Tom didn't move. The only response was the rhythmic, hollow beep, beep, beep of the GUN monitor, keeping a mechanical tally of a life hanging in the balance. Tails walked over to the opposite side of the bed, his twin tails dragging limply on the linoleum floor. He gently rested his hands on the edge of the mattress, looking at the complex medical array.
The vitals are stable, Sonic.
The young fox offered softly, trying to find comfort in the numbers on the screen.
His heart rate is steady. He's fighting. Dad is the Wachowski. He's strong.
Knuckles stepped closer, placing a large, comforting hand on Sonic's shoulder, his deep voice resonating in the quiet room.
The fox speaks the truth, Sonic. Our father faced a strike fueled by the purest chaos and wrath, yet his spirit remains anchored to this realm. He is a warrior of the highest order. He will not concede to the darkness.
Sonic didn't look up. He just leaned his forehead against the cold metal railing of the bed, his hand still desperately holding onto his dad. The crushing weight of the last 24 hours was bearing down on him so heavily, he felt like he was suffocating. He had no rings to escape this reality. He had no speed left to run away from the pain. He was just a kid in a quiet hospital room, surrounded by his broken family, waiting for a heartbeat to change. The constant electronic beep, beep, beep of the monitor continued to anchor the grief in the quiet London hospital room. Sonic stayed glued to Tom's side, his fingers laced around his dad's hand, terrified that if he let go, the rhythm on the screen would stop. Maddie gently stroked Sonic's quills, her silent tears dripping onto her cake jacket, while Tails and Knuckles stood by like protective shields, refusing to leave their brother's side. They were trapped in the heavy, agonizing waiting room of the aftermath. But 50,000 miles away, the universe was moving on. Far from the sterile, rain-slicked streets of London, the blazing sun of an Earth desert beat down upon a vast, shifting ocean of white sand. The silence here was absolute, broken only by the dry whistle of the wind cutting through barren rock formations. In the center of a wide, freshly scorched crater, a small object glinted beneath the harsh desert sun. It was a heavy, thick band of polished golden alloy, an inhibitor ring. It lay half buried in the sand, still radiating a faint microscopic hum of dormant energy, a tiny remnant of the cataclysm that had unfolded in the upper atmosphere. A shadow fell over the crater. A heavy white and red skateboot crunched into the loose gravel at the crater's edge. The stride was slow, uneven, and heavily weighted, carrying a body that had survived the impossible. Shadow the Hedgehog stood at the rim, looking down at his discarded piece of armor. His black fur was singed, covered in a thick layer of cosmic ash and desert dust. The crimson stripes on his quills, usually vibrant with raw power, looked muted and dark. His chest heaved with a shallow, ragged breath, every muscle in his ultimate life-form biology screaming from the absolute burnout of unleashing his raw, uninhibited chaos energy to push the Eclipse cannon away from the planet. He had survived the explosion, plummeted through the atmosphere like a falling star, and crashed into the wasteland. By all accounts of science and military logic, he should have been vaporized. But he was still breathing. Shadow slowly walked down the incline of the crater, his boots sinking into the hot sand. He knelt down, his hand trembling slightly as his gloved fingers brushed the dirt away from the golden ring. He picked it up. The metal was burning hot, but he barely felt it. As he slid the heavy band back over his wrist, a sharp metallic click echoed across the empty desert. Instantly, a visible shudder ran through Shadow's body. The wild, fluctuating golden aura that had been bleeding randomly from his quills was suddenly snapped back into place, locked down tightly behind his biological dam. The immense, suffocating weight of his own power subsided, returning to a controlled, simmering ember within his chest. Shadow closed his eyes, leaning his head back as the quiet returned to his mind. For the first time in 50 years, the voice of Professor Gerald wasn't echoing in his thoughts, twisted by vengeance. The rage that had blinded him, the suffocating darkness that had driven him to tear through Tokyo and London, was gone. It had burned away in the atmosphere, replaced by the words of a blue hedgehog who had looked at him not with fear, but with understanding.
Maria might be gone, but your love for her will always remain.
Shadow opened his eyes. They were still a piercing, fierce ruby red, but the chaotic orange sparks were entirely gone. He looked down at his ringed wrist, then up at the endless blue sky above the desert. He had no country. He had no home. Ji-Wen would undoubtedly hunt him the moment they realized Prison Island's greatest secret was still walking the earth, and the Robotnik legacy was nothing but ash in the wind. But as the sun began to climb higher, baking the desert in a warm golden light, Shadow didn't feel the crushing weight of his past anymore. He felt the phantom warmth of a young girl's hand against a glass capsule. He felt the memory of a stargazing night. He had a choice now. He was finally free to live the life Maria had wanted for him. Turning his back on the crater, Shadow began to walk away, his hover skates sparking to life with a quiet, controlled hum as he set off across the dunes toward the horizon, ready to forge a new life in a world he had chosen to save. Shadow halted his advance across the shimmering dunes. The rhythmic, mechanical hum of his hover skates died down, leaving him once more in the absolute, crushing silence of the desert. He looked down at his gloved hands. They were caked in dried blood, soot, and the microscopic dust of a shattered space station. But as he stared at his palms, he didn't see the ash. He saw the vivid, agonizing memory of his golden hands slipping away from Sonic's. He remembered the exact moment Sonic's superform had fractured. He remembered the look of pure, unadulterated terror in the blue hedgehog's emerald eyes as the sheer kinetic force of the Eclipse cannon's reactor core emptied him of his power, sending him plummeting helplessly like a stone toward the atmosphere. Shadow had stayed behind, absorbing the full brunt of the chaos energy to push the weapon into a safe orbital trajectory, but he had been forced to watch Sonic fall.
Did the Fox catch him?
Shadow's chest tightened, a sharp physical pain blooming behind his ribs that had nothing to do with his injuries.
Did they make it to the ground? Or did the friction of the descent?
He choked on the thought, forcing his eyes shut. For 50 years, Shadow had believed he was entirely alone, a singular weapon forged for a purpose that had ended in a blood-stained laboratory. But in those frantic hyperspeed hours across the globe, Sonic had broken through the walls. Sonic had looked at him, a rival, an enemy who had tried to destroy everything, and offered him a hand anyway. Sonic had understood the agonizing void left behind by a stolen home. And then there was the human, Tom. Shadow remembered the horrific sound of his own spin attack colliding with the sheriff's chest back in London. He remembered the way the man had collapsed into the rubble of the GUN headquarters, completely lifeless, while the woman Maddie had screamed in a state of utter heartbreak. At the time, Shadow's vision had been clouded by a 50-year-old bloodlust, a parasitic rage planted in his mind by a grieving, vengeful Gerald Robotnik. But now, with his inhibitor rings firmly locked onto his wrists and his mind finally clear, the horrific weight of his actions came crashing down on him.
What have I done?
Shadow whispered to the empty desert. His voice was cracked, raw, and barely audible over the whistling wind. If Tom Wachowski was dead, he had inflicted the exact same shattering, life-destroying trauma onto Sonic that GUN had inflicted onto him 50 years ago. He had become the very monster that tore Maria away. He had taken Sonic's protector, his first real home, and ripped it away in a flash of red chaos energy. A deep, trembling breath hitched in Shadow's throat. A single tear, hot and heavy, welled in his ruby-red eyes and slipped down his dark muzzle, cutting a clean path through the desert grime. He had to know. The uncertainty was a worse torture than the stasis pods of Prison Island. He desperately needed to find out if Sonic was alive, if the two-tailed fox and the echidna had survived the re-entry, and if the human sheriff was still breathing. If he had destroyed Sonic's family, the guilt would tear his ultimate biology apart from the inside out. But how? Shadow looked around at the endless expanse of white sand. He didn't know what continent he was on. He had no communicator, no connection to GUN's tactical network, and the sky above was completely devoid of the orbital satellite weapons he usually hijacked. He was a ghost in a wasteland. Shadow gritted his teeth, his fists clenching so hard the fabric of his white gloves strained. The grief and anxiety burning in his chest transformed into a desperate, roaring resolve. He couldn't just sit here and disappear into a new life. Not yet. He owed Sonic his existence. He owed that family the truth.
Hold on, Sonic.
Shadow murmured, his gaze locking onto the distant northern horizon where the sand met a jagged mountain range. With a fierce, explosive burst of yellow sparks, his hover skates roared back to life. Shadow gritted his teeth against the agonizing pain in his burned muscles, leaned forward, and launched himself across the desert floor like a black streak of lightning. He would find a civilization. He would hack into a GUN outpost. He would find a way back to them, even if he had to run across the entire planet to do it. The black streak of lightning tore across the desert floor, kickstarting a desperate, blinding sprint toward the jagged silhouette of the northern mountains. Shadow leaned low into the wind, ignoring the white-hot agony radiating from his hyperextended muscles. Every stride of his hover skate sent a concussive shockwave through the sand, but no matter how fast he moved, He could not outrun the horrific imagery playing on a loop inside his mind. The crunch of the sheriff's chest under his spin attack. The agonizing terminal scream of the woman in London. The shattering of Sonic's golden aura as he fell into the atmosphere.
Answer me.
Shadow growled through grit teeth, his voice a raw friction against the dry desert air. He clutched at the invisible threads of the universe's ambient energy, trying to force a connection. Nothing happened. The air didn't fracture. The crimson static of his warping ability refused to spark. The absolute burnout of his confrontation with the Eclipse cannon had drained his internal chaos reserves to a microscopic ember. He was entirely grounded, stripped of the godlike power that had defined his existence for 50 years. He was at the mercy of distance, traveling through a world he did not know, entirely blind to the fate of the only people who could truly understand him. By the time the desert floor gave way to arid, rocky foothills, the sun was beginning to dip below the horizon, painting the sky in a bloody, violent violet that reminded him far too much of space. Shadow finally skidded to a halt at the crest of a ridge. His chest heaved violently, a thin trail of gray smoke wisping from the cooling vents of his jet boots. He looked down into the valley below. Nestled in the rocky canyon was a highly fortified military compound. The imposing concrete walls, automated security turrets, and the prominent, sleek emblem painted across the tarmac of the helipad confirmed its identity instantly. A Guardian Units of Nations regional outpost. Shadow's ruby eyes narrowed, a cold, dangerous calculation overriding his physical exhaustion. Under normal circumstances, he would have bypassed a GUN facility entirely, or dismantled it systematically to ensure his freedom. But desperation changed the parameters of his programming. That base contained a secure uplink to the global GUN mainframe. It held the tactical reports from the London crisis. It held the answers to whether he was a savior or a murderer. He dropped down the ridge, moving like a phantom through the lengthening shadows of the canyon. Bypassing the perimeter sensors was trivial for a specimen of his design. He timed the sweeps of the security cameras, slipped beneath the infrared tripwires, and sliced open an auxiliary ventilation access panel with a single, sharp strike of his gloved fist. He slid into the cold, metallic belly of the base, navigating the dark maintenance shafts until he located the server nexus for the facility's communications array. Dropping down from the ceiling into the quiet, air-conditioned server room, Shadow didn't waste a second. He ripped the interface panel off the primary terminal, exposing the glowing fiber optic bundles. He didn't have a device like the two-tailed fox, but he didn't need one. He manually connected a localized data patch cord directly into the auxiliary port of his left wrist inhibitor, forcing his own bioelectric field to act as a decryption key. The terminal monitor flickered, cascading through thousands of lines of cryptographic GUN security code before finally flashing a stark, white text across the screen. Access granted. Regional Command Uplink Terminal 09. Shadow's fingers flew across the input interface with mechanical precision, his heart hammering against his ribs as he filtered through the global emergency dispatches from the last 12 hours.
Filter by location. London sector.
He muttered, his eyes scanning the data streams.
Search parameter. Incident Eclipse cannon casualties.
The screen blinked. A heavily redacted tactical file pulled up, bearing the high-priority seal of Director Rockwell's administration. Shadow's gaze locked onto the logistics log at the bottom of the report. Logistics note: all high-priority assets, civilian casualties, and non-terrestrial entities associated with Project Shadow Aftermath have been routed to secondary secure sector. Location: St. Thomas Hospital, London, UK. Status: secure GUN medical lockdown initiated. Shadow's breath hitched. That was it. No medical files were attached to the regional server. No casualty names, no status reports, no confirmations of life or death. The network was locked tight under a local encryption blanket that could only be breached from inside the London hospital itself. He knew where they were, but he still didn't know if they were alive. The agonizing weight of the unknown pressed down on him tenfold. Sonic, the fox, the echidna, the sheriff, they were all thousands of miles away across an ocean, huddled in a medical ward in the heart of the British capital, while he stood stranded in a desert outpost. Shadow disconnected the patch cord from his wrist, the terminal monitor snapping back into a looping security prompt. He looked down at his ringed hands, the crushing anxiety burning in his chest transforming into a grim, unyielding focus. He didn't have a bag of warp rings. He didn't have the strength to teleport across continents. But as he looked up at the ceiling of the GUN base, his ruby eyes flashed with a quiet, dangerous resolve. He would steal a transport. He would stroll away on a supersonic military jet. He would cross the Atlantic by any means necessary. He would not hide. He would not start his new life as a ghost in the shadows while the boy who saved him was potentially mourning a shattered family. He had to face them. He had to look into Sonic's eyes and find out what his rage had cost them. Silently, Shadow slipped back into the ventilation shaft, disappearing into the dark as he began his long, perilous journey toward London.